Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started shortly. We're just waiting on, oh, there she is. Amanda's here. So we're going to get started shortly. Just a couple of reminders. If you are not a member of the TRC, please make sure that your phone or your screen is on mute. Everyone not affiliated with the TRC is welcome to listen in. But this discussion is just for TRC members. I do have the chat box open, so if any non-member needs to ask a question, please put it in there, and then I'll respond to it as appropriate. I want to welcome all our TRC members back to an actual call. It's been an interesting couple of months with the pandemic and the changes that we've had to make, and I want to thank you all for working diligently in those. Couple of notes for TRC members. We have the 427 summary that has been sent out, and you've also received the current voting status for the last 3 agendas. Please review those that you are CR champions for and begin inputting the TRC evaluation into the website. For non-TRC members watching, we have one summary that has been posted on cmac.org. That summary is being revised to update some last-minute votes that have changed a few of the TRC decisions. We're working on having summaries for the last 2 agendas, email agendas out, and hope to have those up and running by the end of this week, first of next week. We will also be recording this webinar, and then we're going to post this on our YouTube channel for posterity and future viewing. So again, if you are not a TRC member, please mute your screen and your phone, and then we're going to get started with today's deliberations and discussions. We do have a rather sizable list of CRs to go through, 114 to be exact. Hopefully we can get through all of them. As many of them are grouped. Any CRs that we don't get to will be deferred to a later call. So with that being said, I see that Amanda's on. So we're going to turn it over to Amanda, and we'll get the meeting started. All right, Amanda, it's all yours.
Okay, hi everyone. Hope everyone had a good Memorial Day weekend. We're back on call schedule for weekly calls, and so why don't we get started? I do have a hard stop at 3 p.m. Eastern, so we won't keep you over today. So why don't we go through the first few CRs on the agenda are more substantive ones, and then we have some catch-up. So we'll just try to get as far as we can with the time we have today, and hopefully we can get some good discussion going, and we'll go forth. So the first 2 CRs have to do with water clarity and being able to see the bottom of the pool, and Miklos is the champion of those, and trying to see if he's on.
I'm here.
Oh, he's on, yeah, okay, great. So I'll just turn it over to you to provide a summary of those 2 CRs that are related, and then we can discuss.
Sure. Both CRs are asking for changes in the wording for 4.5.1.2-0002. They're asking for a change that the wording, water in aquatic venue shall be sufficiently clear, such as the bottom is visible during all periods while the swimming pool is in use. The original wording did not include during all periods or swimming pools in use. It just said when the water is static. And for 5.7.6.1, it's essentially the same sort of clarification request. After reviewing these, usually the term static when it refers to water clarity is in reference to turbulence on the surface of the water. So often once patrons enter the water or due to wind or rain, turbulence creates a obstruction to the bottom of the pool. So that's why typically the term static is used. Because of those, I probably would not recommend either change because it is referring more to the ability of the water being clear, and that while the water is not in use, that the pool is clear enough to see to the bottom. And so it's not taking into account the turbulence caused by users or by environmental factors. It was unclear as to whether the CR requester may have been referring more towards turbidity, which would be the cloudiness of the water, which that I think would be a separate kind of change request and probably for a different section.
This is Amanda. I agree with that. I think that it would be, especially for something like spas, very difficult for to have this water clarity standard for when the water is being agitated. Obviously, it would be ideal that you'd be able to see the bottom during those conditions as well. But I think in terms of the respect of the water being clear enough and not the water quality being good enough to see the water, see the bottom, it really, if the water is in an agitated state due to bathers or jets or whatever, it's going to be very difficult. And it's just a reality of having people in the water. Also for 4512, I think that it's specific to the swimming pool in use, but the whole section is referring to aquatic venues in general and not just swimming pools. So I wasn't clear if it was only for pools or if it would incorporate things like spas or other things that would have more agitated water.
Correct. Yeah. Even if you weren't talking about spas, I mean, spray features would create that turbulence on top of the water. And this is something that is a known factor, and it's addressed in most lifeguard training curriculums and specifically. So it's not a unknown to the industry.
Were there any technical support committees that were addressed that you got feedback or assigned to the CR that you got feedback from?
No, I felt this was pretty straightforward, and seeing how this is something I deal with pretty constantly, I was able to answer.
Okay. So I'd like to open up if any of the other technical review committee members have any questions or comments. And then if not, I think we could probably take a vote. And let me just make sure that we have enough attendees to get consensus as well, but I'll open up to any other comments right now.
Hey, this is Ellen. Since nobody else is talking, I just wanted to confirm that I agree with you guys that, for spa, it's not realistic at all. And if it's going to cover all aquatic venues, then there's no way you could really do this practically.
Okay, it does look like we have at least 9 people, 9 technical review committee members present. It could be more. It's hard to Zoom keeps moving around on me. But why don't we, I think it'd be easier, just, if anyone would recommend a yes vote on these two CRs, 4512-0002 and 5761-0001. Okay, seeing that it looks like we're all going to recommend a no vote on these two CRs. So Miklos, I think we're all set. You can, write up these, finish up those forms for these and have it as the TRC recommending a no vote unanimously. Okay.
All right.
The next.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Someone have a comment?
No, that was me. I just said, okay, thanks.
Okay, great. Sorry. Okay. The next two CRs, Kevin is the champion of, and these have to do with, these are kind of substantive ones having to do with flow rate and water discharge rates for aquatic venues. So I'll give it over to Kevin to present a summary of those. Thanks.
Hey everybody, so 4.7.4.1.2-0002 is the first one here in regards to a quick summary of this one. Oops, where I lost my summary. So this one is regarding the performance of a UV disinfection system, basically a proposal to increase water replacement for only high-risk venues when the UVT drops out of the validated range of the UV reactor. So the comments from the technical support committee on this one were basically that there was considerable discussion on whether this belongs in the code. The reasoning is simple: to keep the increased risk aquatic venue open when conditions require maintenance to ensure health and safety are not affected. So present code protects the health and safety with UV alarms that have been required in the code since it was first written. There are many variables involved that reduce both UVT and increase turbidity. The annex already addresses several ways to replenish water when required. This one is just another recommendation that is already covered by present annex language. So the recommendation of the TSC on this one is a no vote, and I'm in agreement with that. You want me to go on to the second one? Or do we want to talk about that one first?
I think that they're different enough that it would make sense to do one at a time. I mean, they are related to some degree, but I think that one at a time is probably easier.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Ellen. I agree with you that I don't think we should vote for this. I'm concerned about continuing to run when there is not sufficient UV dosage then to the water. I think we should probably vote no to that.
Is it, this is Miklos, so is it my understanding that this one, it says, it's saying that when the turbidity exceeds 5 NTUs that this feedback loop would kick in? And so it seems like it would be more of a Band-Aid to a larger problem rather than fixing the problem of turbidity itself. Is that kind of correct?
I think that's a fair assessment.
Okay, then yeah, I would agree with your assessment on it in the TSCs.
Okay, so is anyone in favor of recommending a yes vote on this CR? Okay, so 47412-0002, I'll put that down that we're recommending a no vote unanimously. And we can go on to 47412-0003.
All right, so this one is in regards to water replenishment volume determination and discharge frequency. The person who submitted this basically says that the code additions address a situation where water quality could be impaired due to infrequent discharge of water or where a lack of record keeping could prevent effective water discharge rates. Controlling water quality will protect public health since water quality can impair disinfection. Trying to give a better summary here. This one also, the feedback from the TSC was a little different here in that they felt that there were actually two sections that were addressed. The 4.7.1.2.1, the concept of counting attendance through turnstiles and or paid admissions would be almost impossible in public pools with multiple venues to determine how many bathers are in each venue. This is already something that's noted in the annex. In spray grounds where no fencing or gates are required and many locations not even manned during operation, this would not be feasible. And then also 4.7.4.1.2.2, the number is not supported by any scientific reasoning or data. However, the frequency of water replacement and how to estimate bather load should be addressed in the future once there is more supporting data. And so for those reasons, they've recommended a no vote on this, and I'm also in agreement with that.
Okay, does anyone have any comments on this CR?
I do actually. This is Ellen. I'm going to be devil's advocate on this one. I agree for the 121 that it's not suitable for a lot of facilities, and it's also not shall language. It's just can be based. So for that alone, it would be annex material, I think. But for the second one, I think it's a good idea to kind of set some kind of limit on, how often you do need to discharge that water based on bather load. So it's how often is reasonable. I think weekly sounds pretty reasonable, but just wanted to start some discussion on that and see what the rest of the committee thought.
Yeah, no, and I think that's exactly what the TSC is saying. But the problem that they have with it is that there's no data other than, feelings as to how often that should be.
This is Amanda. I'd be curious. I think that the MAC, does address in other sections the frequency for, water replenishment and the requirements for that. So that there may already, obviously, a good operator is going to do what is needed for water quality. But I think that we should, if we were going to consider, whether we wanted to suggest modified language, we should probably check and see if there's already similar requirements for water replenishment that do exist. I know that, with a half-hour turnover, which I think is that the facilities, there might already be some, I think there's already a water replenishment frequency requirements for spas and other things based on the bather load formula. So, that might be something to look at and see whether that already adequately addresses this concern.
Amanda,
Does Amanda, just based on what I have seen in the MAC, looking at bather load, I think spas are the only other example where, there's something special where it does give something different.
hey, this is Miklos. I think the spas are the only one where it specifically says it has to be done, or it should be done, whereas I think in the 4.7.4 section, it's discussing that the filtration system should be designed to be able to discharge the water at that rate, but does not give any specific guidance as to this must be done at a certain rate. It does in the annex. It talks about the 4 gallons per user per day as a recommendation, but it does not give like a specific facilities must do this. It's more of a design criteria.
Just to follow up with that, this is Dewey. Under 5.6.7.4.2, the MAC indicates a volume of water totaling at least 4 gallons per bather per day per aquatic venue shall be either 1, discharged from the system, or 2, treated with an alternate system meeting the requirements of MAC 4.7.4 and reused.
And thanks, Dewey. I apologize. I had gotten this combined with the older one that talks about the half-hour turnover. So this doesn't actually address anything with that. But I do think it is an operational requirement. So any change would belong in that section of the code, Chapter 5, not Chapter 4. But it sounds like, and feel free to weigh in, please, that the existing water replenishment requirements might be sufficient. But certainly if not, then maybe we can discuss, working with the CR submitter to work on an operational requirement that might fit. But I think in general, this wouldn't belong in the design section of the code anyway.
So if we were to go back to James, then ask him to change the CR to split it into 2 different change requests, one for the 121 and for the 122. Should we vote on those separately then as a TRC?
I think if we're going to recommend that different language be addressed, and obviously this is a little tricky because it is within the intent of the CR to actually put it in what the TRC feels is a better section for it. So if we're saying this is really an operational requirement, it belongs there, then I think, we would want, and if we don't agree with that language, then I think we would just propose that any change in language, some modified language, should be included in the other section and not include that. And then we would vote on that individual. I think if we're in agreement that we don't think that it's practical to base it on daily attendance or paid admissions, then we would just not include that in our recommended modifications to the language.
Just as a reminder, from a process standpoint, we couldn't do a new CR. We can only modify existing CRs. The CR submission process has been closed, so any new CRs would be an issue.
So how would that work then, Dewey, if this really needed to be split into 2 different sections and 2 different CRs? You're saying that we couldn't really do that. We'd have to either leave it the way it is and vote on it as a whole, ask James to pick one or the other that he really wants to stick to, and then we'll vote on that one.
Yeah, basically, I'm really uncomfortable with the thought of trying to put in any new CRs. We've already had a period where we accepted CMAQ member work, committee work, towards the end of January. So we've already exceeded kind of that deadline. And just being the gatekeeper of the process, I think we need to deal with what we have now, including alterations, but not a new one, so to speak.
And this is Amanda. I know that last time around, we wouldn't have treated this as a new CR. I mean, it would be renumbered potentially if we were changing the section. But, you know, we did, if it's still within the intent of the original change, but the TRC is recommending that it be better located. We have, you know, and it is hard on the TRC because then we have to keep track of what we're changing it to. But, you know, that is something that in the process, in past change request processes, you know, in 2017, that we were able to change sections. It made more sense with the intent of the original CR. You know, we weren't inventing something new. It was just, you know, modifying the language and basically finding it a better home.
Yeah, and that's well within the TRC purview. I'm just throwing a cautionary tale out about any, you know, the language of new CRs. The TRC would be renumbering this existing CR.
Is James on the line? Okay, I guess not. Because, yeah, I'd like to ask him if, I don't know if that's appropriate, to be TRC member and the author of this change request. If we could just drop the one that ends in 1 and keep the one that ends in 2 and change where it is.
Well, I think if that's the case, that we want to keep the second part of that proposed language. So basically keep the required volume of water shall be discharged at least weekly or immediately after the amount to be charged equals 10% of the total system volume. If we agree that we want to keep that part, and we recommend that it, you know, be fit into the chapter 5 section on water replenishment, then I think because James isn't here to actually agree to that, we can certainly, Kevin, as the champion, if you want to, and we can find that section for you. Then the general process would be that you would reach out to, you could get TSC input too, but I think if the TRC is leaning towards this being, you know, good, you can reach out to James and see if he agrees with the modification. And then we can move this for 7412-0003. We'll move this to be revisited on a future call. Does that sound good to everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Take silence. Okay.
Yes.
So does anyone have any comments on this one before we move on?
I think that maybe part of this I may not have explained very well, but just to be clear, I think the part that the TSC objected to is kind of the arbitrary use of 10% of the total system volume, because this is really just trying to stipulate how frequently it has to be discharged, or a minimum amount of discharge, I guess would be the better way to put it. And I think their objection was really to the 10% number, not having any real science behind it.
Okay, that's a really good point. Does anyone want to still, you know, push this forward back to the submitter, or do people feel like that it just needs to be something that, you know, maybe gets addressed in a future cycle with some better scientific rationale for the number of 10%?
What kind of data could you even generate to show that it needs to be 10%? That's what confuses me, is like the scientific justification for what we really have to find in the peer-reviewed literature.
Yeah, I think that's the struggle.
So does that mean that in the absence of nothing, that we don't make any common sense recommendations of what might be a good idea?
I guess my question is this something that's already done, you know, in normal operations where, you know, operators use a specific percent of total system volume, or is it more done on a need basis where, you know, you realize you just can't keep treating the water and that there needs to just be some replenishment.
Yeah, I think in practice right now, it's the second thing you said.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and also a lot of this is done through regular backwashing. So that is included in this, in that discharge. So putting requirements on it, I think would kind of change that.
Well, if you're doing it with backwashing, that would probably be more often actually than what's required there. So you probably, putting this into the MAC wouldn't change anything, yeah? Or not?
Depends on how well the system is designed and maintained. You know, how frequently the filters are being backwashed is all across the board.
How dirty the people are coming into the pool as well.
Right.
So do people want to vote on this right now, or does anyone still feel like we should propose some modified language back to the submitter?
Well, I think at the very least, it has to be moved to the operations section as opposed to the design section. So that would require going back to the submitter.
I agree.
So Joe and Ellen, you would recommend not voting on this now and putting it, proposing those modifications to the submitter?
Yes, I think that at the very least, it has to be moved to a different section, so it needs renumbered.
Even if it's moved to the different section though, I mean, I think the feeling is that a lot of us are not really comfortable with at least half of the wording in the CR.
No, I would agree with that as well.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, why don't we take a vote, because we're up to 11 members on the call. So just as a reminder, we need 9 for consensus. So is there anyone that would not recommend a no vote on this CR as it stands right now?
I'm really torn. This is Ellen. I think I want to vote yes for number 2, but from what you guys are saying, I'm not so sure. But I would like to hear some more about it, I guess. But we don't really have time. We've got a lot of other CRs to get to.
Ellen, we talk about this a lot, like during presentations I give. And for a lot of facilities, this is really accomplished through backwashing. There's some facilities that may need to discharge a little bit more, but for a lot of facilities, that backwashing generally takes care of it. And so if you're we could do a timeline, for pools, but we wouldn't really need to have some kind of science behind it, where I think more of that was done for spas, which is why there is that timeline for spas, but not really for the other facilities.
Thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like if no one else has any objections to a no vote, it sounds like we have consensus to recommend a no vote on 47412-0003. Okay, so let's move on. So those were the ones that were, we did consider more substantive. Hopefully, we're over half hour into the call. Hopefully we'll be able to move a little bit more quickly through these and get some more under our belts. So the next CR was Joe Laco's CR. So I'll turn it over to you, Joe, to present a quick summary of what the changes were.
This is for 4719110001.
Yes, sorry. Yep.
This is a request to remove some language about flow meters that need to be listed and certified and labeled by NSF ANSI Standard 50 or by an ANSI accredited certification organization. The reason behind this request was that there's only 2 brands that are listed by NSF, and there's quite a few out there on the market that do make it, that would actually meet the same standards, but they're not actually listed. I have some hesitations taking language out of here that takes away our reference to NSF 50, which is found throughout the MAC.
Do they not appear because they haven't been tested, or do they not appear because the information hasn't been updated? So are they NSF 50 approved, just not listed?
Correct.
Or have they been tested through an alternate laboratory that's the equivalent?
Well, the request here is to just take that language out, is to remove the language that says flow meters need to be certified, listed, labeled NSF 50. It doesn't offer any to replace that language at all. It just says to take that out without a substitution.
And it doesn't say that NSF 50 has to be the people doing the certification, right? It's one of those things where another laboratory can certify it to those standards.
Right, and the next 2 change requests kind of fall in line with the same thing, but if you want a variance to something that's listed in your code, there's a way to go around that with a formal application for a variance request that could be approved by, your structural engineers and your design engineers at your jurisdiction level.
Yes, correct. So there always is the option for a designer to apply, through whatever variance or waiver. In New York State we call it a waiver, but most people call it a variance. So whatever that process is, there's always that opportunity to, as long as the authority having jurisdiction uses some sort of process like that, to have that be able to be done to grant a variance or a waiver.
Right.
Hey,
the MAC's been pretty consistent with use in reference to NSF 50.
Hey, this is James, and this is, I think, my CR. I apologize, I joined the call late. Is it appropriate for me to comment on my own CR or not at all?
I think so. I think if you want to provide some support, unfortunately not every CR submitter is on the TRC that would get to do that, but if you have a quick word of support, I think in general, submitters, if you're on the TRC, should abstain from voting, but if you want to put in a quick comment about your intent, I think that's fine.
Okay, yeah, it's not really that I'm going to try to favor one way or the other, just rather explain. And the explanation is that, if you look at the flow meters that are NSF listed on the NSF website, there's only 2 brands, and in my opinion, they're not very good. In fact, I wouldn't even recommend them. And the MAC has moved to recommend better flow meters than these, paddle wheels that clog or these acrylics that foul terribly. And the fact is that you can't get a good flow meter because it's not listed. And, it may be NSF 61 listed or all kinds of other sorts of listing. But, this seems to be a new requirement by NSF, or at least a new option for NSF. And there's really just nothing in it. So, I mean, this really ties the hand of the designer to use a good flow meter, because it's really the shitty ones that are listed. And that's kind of the exact opposite of what the MAC is trying to do. So it's really that I was trying to say here. You know, if they were all listed, then we would use the ones listed. I mean, that's the way that it should be, that every flow meter on Earth should be NSF listed, but they're simply not. I mean, there's 2 brands that are listed and not even good ones. So that's just the background.
Hey, James, you mentioned that there are other certifications. Should we just add those to the CR? So instead of getting rid of NSF 50, say NSF 50 or CP or AWWA, whatever, are there certifications that we could add to the list that would be suitable?
Yeah, I would assume that there's tons of certifications. I mean, I could look up the drinking water ones, but you know, I'm not sure that would include everything. But that would be a good start to do, you know, NSF 61 or whatever. I assume that's the drinking water one, but I'm not positive. And there might be an international one as well. I'm not sure.
Because I could see, you know, people still wanting to have some kind of certification for the flow meter, but if there's other alternatives that are, you know, meet the same intent of making sure that you're not adding any toxic substances to the water and that they actually work, I don't see a problem with adding other certification agencies or other certifications.
Yeah, there's an accuracy requirement somewhere, but the problem in the past with NSF is, you know, if they have it listed for 50 and 61, they get paid twice, and they don't want to deal with stuff like this. I mean, and for, you know, understandable reasons. But like in filter media, for example, you know, drinking water filter media is not acceptable in pools. You know, and it really doesn't make a lot of sense that some way the water needs to be pure if you drink it. Then, you know, if you're I won't get into that, but I'm just saying that this would, you know, if you look at the accuracy requirements that are already in the MAC to have a flow meter that's at least 5% accurate, you know, I think the listed ones probably don't meet that, and the ones that meet that aren't listed. So it kind of puts the designer in a catch-22. So including NSF 61 or something here would probably at least put a Band-Aid on that.
What about using language, instead of taking this out, adding a sentence about other certification providers as approved by the jurisdiction?
Well, I think that basically makes it a variance. But, you know, I would honestly ask, you know, why the hell do we have this NSF certification in there that's useless? You know, I mean, it's not really doing anything except trying to swing business to flow meters that aren't good. You know, I mean, you know, I wish the situation was different, but, you know, I thought when I saw this requirement, I would look and see if there were any listed, because I didn't think there would be any swimming pool listed flow meters, because the only ones I've ever encountered in the field are either paddle wheels that are clogged up or these acrylics that are usually stuck and fouled. And so, you know, I was expecting nothing to be there. And obviously what everybody's using right now are these ones that A, aren't good, and B, aren't listed. I mean, I don't even think you could use 90% of what's currently being used. So this is a very restrictive thing here for no apparent benefit. It's not like there's a great standard, you know, or it's mind-boggling to me. I think if people followed this standard, it would be a disservice to everybody. But I'll shut up on that. Just wanted to kind of explain the rationale there.
James, I'm glad you did for sure. I was just looking on NSF while we're talking here, and I'm blown away. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, it's pathetic. Is what it is.
The other thing about being really, really restrictive is in our health department, we would charge for every single variant. So I would be inclined to say as well, because I don't want to have every person have to pay to have another flow meter put in.
Yeah, thanks for your clarification, James.
Sure thing.
So as a group then, are we going to vote on it as is, or do I want to ask James to add other certifying standards, or what are we asking James to do, if anything?
My opinion is it should be removed from flow meters, but what are the downstream effects of that in regards to other equipment? If we start pulling flow meters out of, or the NSF 50 language out of flow meters, what do we do with everything else? But it should come off of flow meters based on the information that we have and what everybody wants to use and is, for equipment. But what do we do with pumps and other things like that? Does this have no effect on that?
This is Amanda. I think I remember this came up in the last change request cycle, and again, section 4.3 has equipment standards. And so although some equipment is required to be either NSF or other things, there is that general section that talks about where applicable, all equipment used or proposed for use in aquatic facilities governed under this code shall be of a proven design and construction, certified, listed, and labeled to a specific standard for the specified equipment use by an ANSI accredited certification organization. And then 4.3.2, no standards. Where standards do not exist, technical documentation shall be submitted to the AHJ to demonstrate acceptability for use in aquatic facilities. And then there's a 4.3.3 for suitable for intent. So that kind of governs all, equipment in the MAC, or, pool equipment. And then, so there are some specific sections that require certification to a specific standard, but that, we do have that overarching governing equipment section earlier on in the design section of the MAC.
I would think every drinking water flow meter would be certified to some ANSI standard, at least for drinking water use.
So I guess another question is with this equipment standard in 4.3, and there might even be another similar one at the beginning of the recirculation section. I can look for that as well, but I think that might cover what we're looking for if we want there to still be some standard that this equipment has to be, that has to be, decent, essentially, certified to some standard, but not necessarily specifying for specific types of equipment that they be certified. But I'm still trying to find at the beginning of I think there might be something at the beginning of 4.7, another general equipment standard, but that might have gotten taken out.
Yeah, I'm looking, Amanda.
Yeah,
I don't see anything.
I think one of the points James was trying to make here was that if someone's going to follow the MAC as is with this statement that's in there, there's an opportunity for them to be doing better. And they're not able to use the best products that are going to give them the best information to allow them to operate the safest way. And like he says, it kind of has their hands tied and limits their options when there are some better options besides those two that are listed.
So I think if we're confident that, the equipment section 4.3 that does have some general standards but not specific, if we're confident that that provides enough protection and enough guidance for local health departments on what they're going to accept, what types of equipment they're going to accept, then maybe that we can recommend a yes vote on this, for a specific type of equipment and a specific standard because of this, general language that's earlier on in the chapter.
Yeah, I would think the proof
Right.
of acceptability line item 4331, I mean, that gives the AHJ the authority to require a test or a proof of acceptability. So I think that's kind of the catch-all there that allows them to go ahead and request that if there's an issue or a concern.
If it makes any
I agree.
difference, it looks, just by looking at this real quickly, it does look like all the drinking water flow meters are under NSF 61. And that includes some of the common ones that we see on pools that are the better performers.
And I do know that a lot of times people look to that, especially before there was this much listed, that, if it was okay for drinking water, generally, but it is something different. But I think there has been some sort, degree of cross-referencing in the past. But I guess, does anyone have any other comments before we take a vote? Do people feel like we're ready to take a vote on this one?
And I just want to point out one thing, just tying in from a couple of other change requests, is that oftentimes the principal sanitarian will look for NSF listing as a guidepost that the equipment has had some sort of testing. So some of the concepts that we're talking about, while may be valid, are definitely going to be above the average public health person.
I'd like to make a suggestion that we vote on the CR as is, and then if it doesn't pass, vote on the amended one where NSF 61 or whatever other standard is also listed in there could be added in. Is that acceptable for procedural rules?
So Ellen, you're recommending that we vote on it as is, and then if that doesn't pass, then suggest an alternative?
Yes.
That seems fine, yeah.
Do we reference the NFS 61 anywhere else in the MAC?
For drinking fountains, yes, and it is listed in the codes that are referenced up in section 3.3, but it looks like when I Google NSF, or not Google, search NSF ANSI 61, the only place it's actually in the code language itself is under drinking fountain 4.6.7.
Yeah, just plain devil's advocate, I'm wondering if referencing a drinking water standard as opposed to the rec water standard, what kind of flags that might raise or confusion that might raise.
And I think we'd really need to know almost more about what, I guess it looks like the one that's referenced is system components and health effects. So I think I guess it boils down to whether there's differences between water treatment equipment versus pool equipment, in terms of the water chemistry and the integrity of the materials or whatever, whether or not how similar the two testing criteria are, I guess, and whether or not, especially for something like a flow meter, it probably isn't very different. So.
Oh yeah, I agree. I'm just bringing it up.
Yeah, regarding drinking water and pool use for all chemicals, in the chemical section, it says everything has to be NSF listed, but it gives both NSF 50 and NSF 60. So for drinking water, NSF has two standards. The equipment one is 61 and the chemical one is 60. And so all chemicals have to be either 50 or 60.
Gotcha. Well, in that case, we're already referencing that drinking water standard for the chemicals anyway. Maybe would be beneficial to reference the equipment standard, 61.
And I guess that the question would go back to James as the submitter. If instead of deleting that section, we added, NSF ANSI 61, whether or not you feel like that would be acceptable, or if you feel like it's better to just remove NSF 50 as well, or whether 61 would provide enough other options, or if you don't think that that's also going to provide good options for products, and there's still other products that would not be listed that would be, in your opinion, able to be used in pool systems.
Yeah, I think the two options are almost equivalent. If you take it out entirely, there's still an ANSI listing requirement. If you add NSF 61, then it opens the door for all the drinking water stuff as well as anything that's NSF 50. I don't really see a lot of difference in those two options. Maybe taking it out entirely is a little bit broader, in that if there were wastewater or industrial equipment or something, it could be certified to that standard. And I'm not an expert on all the different industry standards by NSF by any stretch of the imagination. It just seems that in this case, if you want to use a good flow meter, you can't, because NSF 50 doesn't list any. Opening that up by removing this and just going to the default or adding drinking water, I think would both suffice.
Well, we've talked, I think, primarily from the perspective of filtration, sanitation kind of stuff, but what about, is there a conflict with manufacturers having to spec out flow meters on water slides and different attractions when we do that, being that a lot of those are international companies that may or may not have specific equipment pieces that are NSF labeled? Now we're asking a manufacturer who has an ASTM requirement to spec out the equipment to have to use specific equipment.
Yeah, I would think the more restrictive, the worse here.
There's an interesting comment in the chat that I think may explain exactly what we're running into a little bit that I want to point out to y'all. Alan Clausen has typed in here that that flow meters are not required to be listed in NSF 50 if the material of construction is listed for drinking water, or if the total square inches exposed to water is less than 100 square inches, which is going to be on almost every flow meter. So it may seem that we really do have a reference here in the MAC that is impossible, and it could turn out that these manufacturers that have listed it in NSF have done so even though there's no requirement to do it under NSF 50.
Let me interrupt you for a minute because we are an hour in and we're only at PR number 5. I'm not wanting to stop the discussion, but we do have a timeline to maintain. Ellen has a recommendation out that we vote CR as is, and that if the CR doesn't pass, then the TRC have on changing the language. Ellen, is that correct?
Yeah, Dewey, you're breaking up some, but I think what you said was correct.
Okay.
And this is Amanda. Before we do that, I think that pointing out that, you know, there might not be, people might not get their flow meters listed because they're not required to be. I think that's great annex material. And as you guys hopefully know, or the CDC can change the annex without, you know, member approval. And I think that would be, we should flag that regardless of, as a great thing to put in there that, you know, it's possible that that type of equipment just doesn't get tested to that standard because it you know, the standard says that it doesn't have to be. Okay, so Ellen's suggestion was to take a vote on it as is right now.
Correct. And if the vote doesn't pass, then to have a second vote on changing the language, which would then have to be worked out between the CR champion and
Did we lose you, Dewey?
Lost you, Dewey.
sorry, I'm here. Are you having trouble hearing me?
You're fading in and out, Dewey.
Okay, let me try this. I don't know what's going on my end. So the recommendation is to vote on it as is. That doesn't pass. Then vote on it with a modification to be worked out by the CR champion and
You guys need to mute your things if you're not talking, because otherwise it's just all static.
Hey, Amanda, since we can't hear Dewey, you want to go ahead and just continue?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the power to mute people either. I think Dewey can as the organizer though. So let's take a vote. How many people are in favor of a yes vote on this change request?
I am.
This is
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
I think I've got 4.
I am.
5,
Aye.
6, 7,
Aye.
8.
Yes.
These are all different people, right?
Yes, Kevin, yes.
Joe, yes. Staniak.
Don't hear any no's.
Yeah.
Okay, does anyone have a no? Let's put it that way. Okay, so I think we're going to recommend a yes vote on CR 471911. So let's move on. We're 207. Joe, the next 2 CRs are pretty similar, although it's putting in the language that it can be approved by the authority having jurisdiction with proper engineering justification for filters and filter media. And again, that's similar to a variance, but I'll let you present that and whether or not you got any technical support committee feedback.
That's for 472120001. It's some language addition. So right now, it says all filters shall be certified, listed, labeled NSF ANSI 50 by an ANSI accredited certification organization. The recommendation here, the change request, is to add language that says, or approved by the local AHJ with proper engineering justification. This goes kind of hand in hand with what we already discussed with some of the general ideas around equipment. I think it was section 3.2 or 3.3 that requires engineering approval at the jurisdiction level anyway.
Correct, and we've also had some change requests to take out that language that's being proposed to be added from various sections because, you know, there's already some blanket sections, you know, that cover variances. Although some members also felt though that it's helpful to have the reminders in that you can always go, you know, to request a variance on things. So I think that's what. So, and these two change requests, this one and 47214-0001, that's for filter media. And so, and the first one was just for filters. So I think we can vote on them separately, but I think in general, you know, they're very similar. So let's open it up to comments.
Yeah, and then and you're right. The next one is about the media, and it's that same addition of language at the end that says, or, you know, NSF 50 or approved by the local AHJ with proper engineering justification.
And as we talked about, section 4.3 does already allow for, you know, the AHJ to approve things, you know, with alternate justification or that are certified to different standards.
Yeah,
so I guess the
I
question
personally,
is whether it's helpful as a reminder.
Right, and I'm personally inclined to, I'm okay with having this additional language because it makes it more clear, and you don't have to go back and forth and reference other sections of the MAC. You don't have to think about it as hard if it's right here for you, with just the addition of, you know, 10 words or so.
I agree. I like the reminders. I think it's helpful for people that are reviewing plans and also for designers that, you know, where there is, you know, that opportunity, or if it's a common thing that might happen, that there are, you know, a reminder that there's other options.
Does anyone want to have further discussion about that addition of that language? And the language specifically, again, is or approved by the local AHJ with proper engineering justification.
I know we're not doing John Kelly's change request now, but this kind of touches on that same subject where there's a lot of language like this that he was trying to take out, saying that if you have your AHJ approve it with proper engineering justification, that's essentially the same thing as a variance. And so is that wording even needed then? And so in a lot of places, he was taking that text out. So I just kind of wanted to bring that up, that I guess we need to try to be consistent if we're going to include or not include language like that.
Yeah, there were quite a few change requests that addressed language consistency about this very thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I personally would have to go back and see if we held any of those or if we, how the TRC voted on those.
So I have a reservation about these, just in that last part where it says proper engineering justification. I don't know that there is a definition of what that means or what would constitute that. Is that even necessary to put in?
This
I
is
think that, yeah.
This is Tina Moore, and I think because I had some that we were taking it out, I think I would probably vote a no on this one just because I don't feel you need it in there.
Can you?
What's the
Hey,
best?
this is James. If I can chime in here just a second, the concern that I had, which may be a non-concern at this point, was that in North Carolina there are no variances. You know, the code is law, and I was told that, you know, no matter what kind of filter professional engineer recommended or what kind of justification they had, there's no way it would be approved for use in a pool in this state. So that's the reason I was putting that in there. But you know, I've had a conversation with Amanda to say that, you know, that different states would probably adopt different versions of the MAC. So my concern was that if North Carolina adopted this version of the MAC, it wouldn't change the problem. And that problem is, you know, I couldn't take the best filter in the world and put it in a pool unless it was NSF listed. And that's really what North Carolina is telling me. So basically, I can't do any research on a pool in this state using any filter that's not NSF listed or any filter media that's not NSF listed. And there are no variances and there are no ways around that. And so I don't know what other states are looking at or how things like this shake out. So that was the point in putting this in here, is that, you know, if your state does variances, you know, it's no problem. You can do variances. But North Carolina apparently doesn't, and I'm not a lawyer or legal expert, so that's the reason for the change requests. And if it's not needed, it's fine.
Does anybody in the town know what other states don't have variances?
Well, the city of Frisco, we don't have variances on our pool rules. We are home ruled, so that means that we have, you know, ordinances plus the state code. But we make sure that an engineer certifies everything, and then, not to get into a bunch of stuff, but our filters, you know, we only accept sand filters on commercial pools, and I don't want to get into all our rules, but I honestly do not think you need that language. Thank you.
I think in our state, we have both. So we have the option that an engineer can validate a filter that it becomes almost equivalent. I mean, it has filtration parameters. So my feeling on it is, if that option is there, then we don't have to give a variance, but we could still approve it. So I kind of like it, but I wanted to make clear that by the extra wording in there, that an engineer justification is not the same thing as a variance, that they could submit it and you could still approve it based on that language in the code without having to go to a variance.
Yeah, I keep thinking to myself, well, what's the best way to say what we're trying to say here? And does that allow for the jurisdiction to take advantage of the best equipment that's out there to provide the safest environment for bathers?
And I can see that proper engineering justification is intended to be protective. And I'm just thinking there are some other CRs that discuss providing a definition for design professional. And so I guess the question is, you know, are there other people that might be proposing plan or putting forth plans that, you know, I think in New York State, you know, it has to be an engineer or landscape architect. And don't quote me on that. But, you know, there are there options that, you know, we can say something, you know, and I understand, and also I think it would benefit in the annex for some language about what a proper engineering justification would entail. So, you know, so that if a local health department's looking at this, they can say, because I can see how, you know, applying for a variance, usually you have to provide some health and safety rationale, that type of thing. But, you know, engineering justification is very different. You know, variance could just be submitted by the facility owner or operator. So I think that is good to have that level of protection, but we might want to provide some information about what that proper engineering justification should entail. But I think that is a better annex discussion.
Is it possible to have this changed a little bit to read something along the lines of that the NSF 50 would be the minimum? The certification, listing, and labeling of NSF 50 would be the minimum requirement, or you could provide equipment that is documented to exceed those standards and not be listed.
Yeah, I was thinking that same thing, Joe. If we could come up with language that says at least NSF 50.
Well, filters shall meet certification, listing, and labeling requirements of NSF ANSI 50 by an accredited certification organization, or exceed those minimum requirements, something along those lines.
So it's not on this first one, but on the second one, on the filter media, you know, I've tested filter media that can remove 90% of crypto in a sand filter versus 21% for sand. And the state of North Carolina specifically told me that there's no way in hell you can put that in any pool in this state. Even though it's much better, it's not NSF approved. And it was NSF 61 listed, but they still said the same thing. It's not NSF 50, and therefore it's not allowed in any pool in this state. And I'm just concerned that as we find better filter media and better filters, that states aren't going to allow them because their codes just are going to be too restrictive. And that's really what I'm trying to address here. And I don't know how to address it or what's the most consistent way, but that's the goal. But if you set NSF 50 as the minimum, that's saying NSF 61 is better, which I think I would say, but I don't think the state of North Carolina would.
This is Dewey. Just as a reminder, the states this is a model code. The states are free to make whatever changes in the adoption that they wish to make. So, you know, just kind of FYI, James, you know, with North Carolina specifically, you know, none of this may solve that issue as the states still can create even a higher standard of what's found in the MAC.
What's the process for changing the language of what's proposed here to what Joe proposed? To you know, at least 50 NSF 50 or greater.
The TRC would formally ask that it gets kicked back and that the submitter works on language. If there is any recommended language, the TRC can recommend that. And then the CR champion would work with that submitter, and then would come back for a vote once the new language has been worked on.
It's already NSF 50 or greater. I mean, that's kind of the problem, is that, you know, nothing is greater than NSF 50. You know, I mean, how do you define what's better than NSF 50?
Yeah, I don't think NSF would be in agreement that any of their standards are greater than their other standards. So I think that wording is problematic. I agree with you on that, James. But this whole discussion is very interesting because we really are somewhat hamstringing ourselves because there are filters that are out there that are, I think, proven to be better filters that, you know, we're basically saying if you adopt this code, this model code as it's written, you can't use. And I don't think we want to do that. I don't think that's the intent. You know, sometimes these filters don't get NSF because we are such a small industry compared to other industries that it's just not worth it for the manufacturer, you know, or it's a filter that's designed for the few, you know, very large pools that are out there. So it's just not worthwhile. And those filters are never going to get NSF 50, which means we're effectively banning them from the industry. Not to mention the new technology part that James is talking about, it hamstrings us there as well. So I think there has to be some formal way to allow for that. It seems kind of silly not to.
So this is Amanda. I had one quick wordsmithing thing for the language. I think we should strike the word local before AHJ, because basically the authority having jurisdiction would be whoever it is. It could be very local or it could be a state agency. But my other thought was whether, if James, if you were willing to draft a little annex language to go along that might, explain what proper engineering justification might consist of. I don't know if that would address some other members' concerns that the use of that term might be a little bit, I'm not sure what that means. But is this something that we want to try to work on a little bit more? Or should we take a vote with the thought that we would strike the word local and maybe get a little bit more annex language, which doesn't have to be voted on at the same time, about what a proper engineering justification could entail?
Yeah, I could work on that, and I'm fine with striking the word local. Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with voting on this. I mean, as you're saying, states that have variances could already use a better filter media if there was one, or if you had a super filter like a membrane from a drinking water treatment plant, there's no way that would pass NSF 50. I mean, it would foul way before it ever passed. And it's almost like if you have a good filter, it won't pass NSF 50. So there's a real problem with requiring that. And I can't elucidate all that here, but there are definitely needs for variances if we're going to do things better in the future.
So Amanda, would you be looking for new, or for a no vote and then a vote later on new language?
I think right now the main thing would be to strike the word local before AHJ, and I think we could vote on it as is, with the anticipation that annex language can be added at the discretion of the CDC at any point. So if members feel like they want to see what that proper engineering justification language is or help to craft it, then we could certainly delay voting on the CR. But otherwise, that's something that could be added separately to provide some information about what proper engineering justification would entail. And it's just more to guide both people who would be submitting that justification and also the people who would be reviewing that justification as to what they should be weighing it at, because a lot of people like the idea that they can just check and see if it's listed and then go on to the next item. So that this would, be more work for all involved, but I think people would be willing to allow that flexibility if it was, if there were some standards in doing so. So I guess, why don't we go ahead and take a vote? The first one would be 47212-0001. That one be for filters specifically. Do we have any people who are recommending a no vote on this CR? Okay, so the TRC is going to recommend a yes vote on CR 47212-0001. Now 47214-0001, that one is specific to filter media. So the vote would be on that language, taking out the word local before AHJ, and with the understanding that there would be some annex language added about what proper engineering justification would entail.
And Amanda, that would be for both of those, right? For the 212 and the 214?
Yeah, I think that we should, and it should be consistent. I mean, it might be a little bit different because it's two different things, but I think just some general things about, what type of justification needs to be provided.
Yeah, and taking out the word local for both of them.
Right. So does anyone recommend a no vote on 47214-0001? Okay, so I will put down that we had recommended yes votes on both of those two, with the removal of the word local. And so Joe, you should be able to write that up, and we can flag in the technical review committee form that, there would be some annex language. And then when you go to do that form, reach out to James and he can get you that language, and we can put that into the form so that people can see what that annex language will entail.
Sounds good.
Okay, so moving on, our next CR is 473-242-0001, and Jason is the champion of that one.
Yeah, hi guys. I'd like to start by letting everybody know that my laptop crashed in the beginning of this call. I had some AutoCAD stuff going, and I couldn't get it restarted again, at least right away. So I've switched to my phone and fired up the desktop. So this is going to be a little clunky, as all my notes were on my laptop. So just bear with me. I got these for my CRs. I got set up the best I can. So this one is 47324-2-001. This is to delete language. And that language is refer to MAC 49211 on the use of compressed chlorine gas in existing aquatic facilities. The purpose for this is the statement is unnecessary and unenforceable. The requirements are already listed in 49211 and standalone and not enforceable without need of this reference. The TSC has reviewed this, and they are recommending that this would get a yes vote. So they're recommending that this clerical correction be approved. And I am recommending that that this be removed as well.
Okay, does anyone have any comments on this?
This is one of John Kelly's change requests, and I think he worked pretty hard to try to develop some consistency throughout the MAC and get rid of some of the redundancy.
Yeah. As far as I can tell, it's redundant. It should come out.
This is Amanda. I personally like the reminders, but I also think that this is the type of statement that could be included in the annex. I'm checking right now to see if it actually is right now. So it's not. I mean, I think that it might be something worth adding to the annex, but I think also that it is, that section itself is not an actual regulatory requirement. It's just a reference. Does anyone else have any comments before we move to a vote?
This is Dewey. Just one thing to note that the 4.9.2.11 reference is in reference to ventilation and chemical storage spaces, and not necessarily the disinfection system itself. whereas the reference as stated in 4.7324 is in reference to actual design of chemical feed equipment. So one is for chemical feed equipment itself, and the other is more in reference to chemical storage spaces. So just a point of clarity there.
Yeah, it's essentially saying, chlorine gas is prohibited for all new construction, but if it is an existing facility, these are the chemical storage and handling requirements for use. And it does, if you go to 4.9.2.11, it does actually reference back to 473.241 that it's prohibited in new construction. So I think that, it is referencing that in that section. So taking it out of the section that is prohibiting it, I think, basically they were referencing each other, and I'm not aware that there's a change request to change that part, but I can check that real quick. It doesn't look like there's any change request to take that reference out of 4.9.2.11. So does anyone have any comments before we move to a vote? Okay, would anyone recommend a no vote? Oh, sorry.
This is Jason again. Going back to this, is there any risk in review of between a designer or somebody reviewing one section and not the other, and going down a road they shouldn't be going down if we remove this? Sorry to go back on you.
I think in general, if it were new plans, then this is a prohibition, so it really, it wouldn't be that they would miss it because it would be prohibited outright, and it would only be for existing construction.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Did someone else have a comment? Okay, does any, sorry. Does anyone recommend a no vote on this CR 473242-0001? Okay, I think we can put this in that the TRC recommended a yes vote. Jason, if you could put in the discussion, I think that we should put a note that this might be, useful something for the annex. But that's not something that, we need to address now or that the TRC needs to vote on.
Okay, will do.
Okay, and I'll let you keep going because you have the next one as well.
Yep. Next is 4732523-001. This CR removes some language and adds language. So it's regarding erosion feeders. So I'll go with removed and then I'll go to added. So erosion feeders shall, this is the portion to be removed, use aquatic venue water post-filtration as the source water unless approved by the feeder manufacturer. That is to be removed and replaced with erosion feeders shall be installed in accordance with the manufacturer's installation instructions. So the explanation here is not sure what type of approval is required as originally written. Assume that the intent is to install in accordance with the manufacturer's installation instructions, which can more clearly be stated. This was passed to the TSC. TSC comments, the original intent is to ensure that feeders were installed after filtration. The change could create some confusion, which I'll agree with the TSC on this one in reviewing this, that there could be confusion. It's really clear as written that it needs to be post-filtration. Use aquatic venue water post-filtration is fairly clear. So I know that the change simplifies things for the MAC, but the possibility for confusion is there during installation and review. So my recommendation in reviewing this is that it gets a no vote.
I would agree with that. I think it almost needs both pieces. Truthfully, it should be installed according to the manufacturer's instructions, but also should be post-filtered.
Yeah,
We need the word "and."
Yeah.
Could we kick this back and retain both?
I think we have, well, the existing one, says unless approved, but I think we also have a general statement for equipment that everything has to be used in accordance with, or installed in accordance with manufacturer's instructions. I think that's more of a blanket statement. I can try to find it, but I know that was addressed the last change request cycle, that, they need to make sure that everything's being installed appropriately. I can look for that for a second.
Yeah, I think I was on that TSC where we discussed that a lot. It was in regards to chemical feeders. Around the same lines here.
This is Ellen. We manufacture calcium hypochlorite, and we do have some customers that do like to feed it ahead of the filter. And if somebody chooses to do that, and as long as all the other health and safety aspects are all met, I'm not sure why that would be prohibited.
I think that's a really good question. I'm trying to figure out the answer to that too.
The only thing I can think of is ancillary equipment down the line, so heaters, etc.
Yeah, but this is the inlet to the feeder, right? It's talking about source water to the erosion feeder, which would be the inlet, not the chemical injection.
Well, source water to the erosion feeder is still filtered water, correct?
Doesn't necessarily have to.
That doesn't have to be.
We do
Yeah, I
have
think the
some
point of-
equipment out there. I'm sorry, Jeff. We do have some equipment out there by various manufacturers that are designed to use filtered water into the chlorinator or dispenser, rather, or feeding equipment, which then goes back into refilter. So we do see that.
I think as the way the MAC has it written right now, with the water going through the erosion feeder post-filtration, is so that a lot of the garbage and debris that might eat up that chlorine is removed in the filter, and that your chlorine isn't going to be used up on stuff that might get filtered anyway.
Yeah, to reduce bioorganic
Yeah.
Loading.
It's better efficiency of your chlorine product.
It is, but to Ellen's point, there is, in the original language, there is a caveat that says unless approved by the feeder manufacturer. So if the manufacturer says, okay, use it pre-filtration, then do we need to, I just don't know that we need to delete that language as it is.
And in terms of manufacturer's instructions, I know I haven't gotten to the feeder section yet, but for all general recirculation and water treatment equipment, the installation of recirculation and filtration system components shall be performed in accordance with designers and manufacturer's instructions. That's 47112.
Yeah, that's a catch-all.
So why have this at all?
Also, well, for flow-through chemical feeders shall only be used with the chemical, oh, that's, never mind, that's not the right thing.
I think this is addressing clogging concerns. You know, if you have debris and stuff, you know, gum wrappers and things coming through the water that you're feeding into this, I mean, you could clog these feeders. So I think the MAC is trying to address that. If the manufacturer just says plumb it up with pressurized water, that we can say make sure the pressurized water comes after the filter. That's the way I'm reading this. I don't know.
I mean, we are given the option, as it's written right now, we're given the option to follow manufacturer's installation instructions. So I think it should remain because it creates a more potential for an issue by striking the current language because of clogs, because of bio loading, you know, pre-filter and things like that. So, but we are in the language gives them the option already.
I agree. So do people feel like we're ready to vote on this one?
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone recommend a no vote on this CR? I mean, a yes vote. Let's go with yes vote. I think there'll be fewer.
I vote a yes, Tina Moore.
Are there any other yes votes? Okay, so that would mean that there were 10 of us, I believe, no, 11 of us that would still recommend a no vote, and that would be consensus for a no vote on the CR. Okay, let's move on. I think Kevin, yours is the next one, 47521-0001. Hopefully this will be pretty straightforward.
Hang on a second. I'm sorry. I'm trying to find that one on my cheat sheet here. I thought I had everything highlighted. I apologize, but can we skip over this one and circle back to it?
Sure. If you want, I can just do it. I think it's.
I'm sorry. I just found it. I don't know what's wrong with me. I just found it. I was in the wrong spot on the spreadsheet. Good grief. Yeah, this one is, in my opinion, a pretty simple yes vote. And in looking at the comments from the TSC, they agree. This one's very, very simple. Let me, sorry, I discombobulated myself there.
No, I think this one probably could have been part of the consent agenda in retrospect. It basically is taking out as defined in the MAC, but because the word SPAs is in all caps, it already signifies that it is defined in the MAC.
Yes.
So.
Thank you. That's exactly the summary on that.
Does anyone have any comments on this one? Does anyone recommend a no vote on this CR?
And Matt, can you repeat the change?
So the change would be, right now the section says all spas as defined in the MAC shall be designed to have a maximum allowable turnover time of 0.5 hour or less. So the change is to take out the wording as defined in the MAC. And note that the word spas is in all caps, which means that it has a corresponding definition in the definition section of the MAC. So the idea is that the wording as defined in the MAC is not necessary because that capitalization already signifies that it has a definition.
Thank you. I could just barely hear you the first time, so thanks.
Okay. Okay. Does anyone recommend a no vote on this CR? Okay, so for CR 47521-0001, we're going to be unanimous on a yes vote recommendation. Let's move on to the next one, 4753-0001. Kevin, that was also yours.
Yeah, this one is regarding the spa inlets located below the surface of the water. Again, I think it's a pretty simple one. The purpose, as explained by the submitter, is that some designers place the filtered return inlets in the seat back of the bench, supplementing the locations of the hydrotherapy jets. The hydrotherapy jet system is on a timer with the
Kevin, we lost you.
Amanda, while Kevin figures out what's going on, can we move to the next block, the next grouping?
Yeah, yeah, this one's been pretty quick, but I think we can. So the next grouping, these are all, I grouped them together because they all have, they're all with respect to chemical storage spaces, and they also, a lot of them recommend deleting specific sections in the chemical storage space section. So I deleted, or I put them together because they all kind of had a common theme. And I would note that I'm pretty sure that in the past, the Ventilation and Air Quality Committee originally for the MAC, and I think they spent a lot of work on a lot of these requirements. And I think there was some work done to try to identify you know, whether some of these things would be going above and beyond what was in normal, you know, building codes and things like that. But I would also like when with the discussion to determine whether or not, you know, the current building code additions, which are, you know, now much more recent than they were 10 years ago, you know, whether they do cover these things or if these are additional protections. So Jason, I'll turn it over to you to just start with we'll go through them one by one.
Okay. So let's see, 49222-001 is so protecting stored materials. The construction, so this is going to strike language. The construction of chemical storage space shall, to the extent practical, protect the stored materials. This is the portion that the CR would strike, is against tampering, wildfires, unintended exposure to water, etc. So the intent is to protect the materials, and the list is unnecessary and incomplete in regards to the explanation. So the CR would be removing that small list there and just keeping it that protect stored materials. Which to me, it makes sense unless that list were to grow, you know, quite a bit more. I mean, I know that's what etc. covers, but it's, or does that change to, my thoughts are, does that change to against something else, that covers everything?
This is Joe. My knee-jerk reaction to this is when you're trying to protect your chemicals in your storage space, there's three big things you want to worry about: unauthorized access, tampering, ignition sources, fires, and have them getting wet, exposure to water. So maybe we could list those three big things, but change the language to say protect stored materials against including but not limited to wildfires, unintended water, tampering.
I like that.
That way we give a few examples that are really important.
Up in there, as opposed to something like ignition sources. Is this something that we want to reach out to the submitter? It doesn't, I mean, we can recommend a change that they don't necessarily agree to, but is this something that we want to kind of just rephrase it instead of striking it entirely?
I think so, if the process allows for that. I think those are the three big things that I worry about with chemical storage, but we could craft the language so it lists those three things, but it doesn't seem limiting or incomplete.
So if we said something like, the construction of the chemical storage space shall, to the extent practical, protect the stored materials against to tampering, ignition sources, and unintended exposure to water.
I like that.
Yeah. I like it.
Okay.
Dewey, what's the process to change a change request?
Same thing. The TRC will come up with either recommended language and send it back to the submitter for approval, or the TRC just kicks it back to the submitter for modifications. So both of those are fine. There's also a possibility of of the TRC changing against submitters. It needs to be a last option. That does not need to be one that is used lightly.
So Joe, the step would be, or I guess it's for Jason's CR, the step would be to contact the submitter, and I can send you the language that I read off because I jotted it down. Basically ask him whether he would be okay changing the CR to that language, and then I think he has a couple weeks to get back to you. So what we'll do is we'll move this to a later agenda to revisit, and then you can let us know whether he was okay with the modified language, and then we would vote on the modified language. Does that sound good?
Sounds good to me, but it's not my CR.
Jason, are you still on the call?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I think Kevin rejoined, and I think hopefully, we only have 4 minutes left. I think we have time to just do that one. I'm not sure we have time. Sorry for a hard start. I think we'll just push that one. So I wanted to say, obviously we didn't get to these, and I think what we'll do is, because of the agendas we already have, starting with the next call, we're going to have some of the ad hoc committees do CR. So I think what we'll do is we'll try to pick up where we left off. The idea would be that if you were prepared to present CRs today, hopefully we'll get to them the next call. But and eventually we might just move them all to a new call. but I think that we'll try to catch up where we can, if there's fewer substantive ones. So just kind of keep these in your back pocket, the ones that, we didn't get to today, and we'll just keep going. Likely we'll have to schedule some additional calls to get through all of these. But I think we did a great job getting back up and running today, and we had some really good discussion. And I think, so if your CRs were voted on by the technical review committee, you can finish up the evaluation forms at this time. I will try to get a call summary from today's call, and also an updated change request list that includes the voting from the last few calls and what CRs we'll need to revisit from the email agendas. I'll try to get all of that out by the end of the week. Note also that because of some scheduling conflicts, our next call will also be on a Tuesday, so June 2nd, and then we'll go back to Monday calls. All of them will be from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern time. Do any TRC members have any other questions at this time about the process or where all the CRs are falling in, or any thoughts?
Amanda, I just have one thing real quick. I'm hesitant to do this because I don't want to stifle discussion, but just with the sheer volume of CRs, we are going to run out of time if we're only getting through 5 or 6 on per 2-hour call. We really need to start considering time limits on discussion. This would involve TRC members reading and forming their own opinion beforehand. So we really need to look at, very, very short periods, maybe 5 minutes discussion on most CRs. Some CRs will take longer. For example, when we get to the isocyanuric CRs, CYA, that will obviously take longer than 5 minutes. But we really need to look at doing something like that for the next call, or else we're going to blow our required timeline out of the water.
Okay, let's try that next call. And the ability for members to review the CRs beforehand, and also if you're the champion to send a quick summary, that'll help too, and see if we can get, I'll be familiar with everything, but I think, we did a good job today. There were some other things, but also the more we become familiar with the process, if there's similar type CRs, we can kind of use a lot of the same rationale, for CRs that are similar. Does anyone else have any comments?
I have a question, Amanda. This is Tina Moore. I got on the call late. Now, I saw my name on there for May 26th, but did you go through to change request forms that were on your schedule?
No, we didn't get to any of your CRs. So the agenda that I send out, the Word document, that'll have them listed in the order that we will address them. So I think actually yours was the last one on the call for today.
Okay, so I'm looking at the wrong one then, I guess, because did you send it out yesterday? Or let's see, Friday or Thursday?
It was the one dated May 22nd.
Oh, I thought mine was before all those other ones. May 22nd, got it. Okay.
Hey, Amanda, I have a question. You know how
Sure.
if we have in the email agenda, right, we can always request that something be put into the meeting call. Can we go the other direction where if we're the champion and we think maybe we could just handle it via email instead of with the call? Can we nominate things that way?
I think that could work. And if anyone who has some CRs that they feel aren't very substantive, someone that we had to defer from the email agendas, let's try it. We do need to keep the process moving, and there are, a bunch of them that aren't too substantive, that we should be able to, and we'll have to gauge the level of participation. As I mentioned in my email before, there were some that we have to hold and revisit on calls because, it ended up being an abstain. We didn't reach consensus, but I don't feel like the consensus was not reached due to the, a lot of deliberation where we truly did not come to consensus. I think it was because there just wasn't enough discussion at all. So I think that, we need to be careful of that not happening. But I think that, you know, if we do find that we can address some by email and that people feel like there's enough people weighing in and hearing viewpoints and things, we're all on the same page, then I think that could work. So why don't we try it for this week with any of the CRs that were on today's agenda that we didn't get to. This is optional if you're the champion and when you want to send an email with the CR number and kick it around. We'll try to see how it goes in terms of being able to keep up with the emails back and forth and also the vote. Maybe we can do even a quick thing at the beginning of the next call to see if anyone will review the list of CRs that we discussed over email and see if anyone has any questions or comments. And then, you know, with the idea that how, you know, we voted was good, but we are going to have to take a vote at some point. So it might get a little crazy over email. But maybe we can at least have some of the deliberation on email so that we could have a quick vote at the beginning of the call. Is everyone in agreement with that, or do you think it's going to be too confusing?
I think that's a good plan,
All right,
Amanda.
let's give it a try for this week. It might get a little confusing, and I don't want to overwhelm people. So we'll just try it for this week. I'll keep track of the ones, and this will be stuff, it should be initiated by the CR champion. So, you know, just provide a quick summary and a quick overview, recommended vote, and then open it up for discussion. And that way we don't have people, we kind of keep all the commenting, you know, to the CR itself and then reply all to the email that the champion sends out. I think that should probably hopefully streamline it. And we'll go from there and see how that works. And then obviously we'll have to write that up so that we can post the summary for the CMAC members as well. But let's give it a try and see if it works. You know, if it helps us get through a handful of CRs, you know, the more we get under our belts, the better. Because obviously it is getting into summer, so. Okay, does anyone have any other questions? I know we're a little after 3. Okay, I want to thank everyone for your participation. I know this has been kind of a crazy process so far, but I think we're on the right track, and we'll talk to everyone next Tuesday and hopefully get some more CRs done. And again, I'll be in touch by the end of the week with a summary and with an updated list. Thank you.
Hey, take care.